And now Teemu is going to tell about the role of social class in Finnish Pentecostal movement.
Yes, thank you, Tuija. As you can see, I slightly changed the title of it, but when first we started to discuss about this seminar, I just said that I would tell something about my research, and about that I will. So I will concentrate on one part, not all the research that I made on social class and Pentecostal congregation and culture, but on the conversion and social class in Finnish Pentecostal movement. Finnish Pentecostal movement, helluntai-herätys in Finnish, has a long history as a lower class movement. As the second and third generation of Pentecostals have experienced notable social upward mobility through generational shifts and societal development, the movement is now leaning towards middle-class positions and cultural styles. Nevertheless, Pentecostalism in Finland in a large part still attracts converts from lower classes. This division between converted lower class and socialized middle class members is demonstrated in many issues in the movement and its congregations, for example in the division between radical and moderate and various styles of religiosity and culture. The modern style of doing religion in Finnish Pentecostalism has been, as usually in Pentecostalism around the world, a popular folk style appealing to common people with charismatic preaching, expression of emotions and experience-based interpretations of one's religion. Radical religiosity, zealous preaching and inexplicable experiences, like speaking with tongues in public, don't always suit for the new middle-class style ideas that many current Pentecostals share. Instead, they find their popular styles from more moderate middle-class repertoire. In my research among Finnish Pentecostal movement, I observed the impact of a congregational culture to social class positions of Pentecostal members. The impact is most visible with the socialized members who have been immersed in the culture and were part of it when they chose their career paths leading to their social positions. In some cases, the adult converts from outside experienced social mobility also, usually when they found that their new religion and culture was not in accord with their current occupation and culture they lived in. How these two groups made their decisions varied noticeably. In this article, I claim that not only the generational shift, but also the difference in identity making through religious experiences is crucial in understanding how people find their social positions in the society. My aim is to show the linkage between conversion experiences and decisions leading to social positions within the cultural framework and group boundaries. Finnish Pentecostal movement is a 100-year-old religious movement with nearly 50,000 baptized and over 100,000 affiliated members. And so it is the largest religious institution or network outside the state churches in Finland. The Turku Pentecostal Church is a local congregation of over 1,500 baptized members. And congregations in the movement emphasize independence but are still closely connected with shared Bible school organizations and mass events like summer conference. There are local variations between the congregations, but the main difference comes from the size of the groups. Smaller ones can sustain a close culture, whereas bigger ones tend to be nowadays more plural, moderate and middle class oriented. In this article I concentrate on the scene that the bigger congregations reveal of the movement. The main findings from my research reveal that the majority of Turku Pentecostal Church members, the working age people are in middle class positions. Furthermore, it is evident that congregational culture promotes certain occupations, styles and cultures, and therefore particular social class mapping in the church. This became evident when I observed the social mobility of second and further generations of Pentecostal members. The more Pentecostals there were in one's family, the more evident was the upward mobility to certain favorable occupations and positions. Theoretical finding was the fact that this process of finding one's social position can be explained as a process where a rationally selective individual makes decisions in the framework of his or her cultural boundaries. In order to be able to keep the integrity of his or her religion intact, one tends to make decisions that ensure his or her position in the congregation. First in the congregation and in the society only after that. Certain occupations are questionable mainly because of the culture they promote. Therefore, the class culture of different positions is crucial when an individual tries to find a career and place where she or he feels right. In the best scenario, an individual can describe his her position as a vocation and that she has been guided there by God. Furthermore, the culture offers ways to legitimize certain actions within the cultural framework for a Pentecostal member. Crossing the cultural boundaries can happen acceptably only by using insight symbols and discursive rituals. A Pentecostal can make a questionable occupation, career or position legitimate choice just by using Bible as sanctifying object. Knowing the symbol universe of one's culture can help an individual to navigate in the world and make culturally acceptable choices with better assurance. Pentecostalism is a mode of Christianity that is most famous for ecstatic experiences like speaking in tongues and charismatic preaching and outreach evangelization. The way I approach Pentecostalism is to view it through its crucial aspects that can explain its dynamics and cross-cultural expanse. Pentecostal religiosity is, in my mind, based on a threefold cycle which consists of emphasis on discursivity, experience and millenarianism. The millenarian beliefs of New Pentecost, Kingdom of God and Coming of Christ are experienced various ways and interpreted through these personal experiences. Orally transmitted stories of revivals and future hope are relatively easy to transmit cross-culturally through bodily experiences and acceptance of local ontology, even as an oppositional field in this millenarian worldview. In this article I won't go into detail of this dynamics, but instead I will concentrate on one experiential aspect of Pentecostalism, that is conversion and its implications on social class. And as we know, in Pentecostal religiosity, conversion is a crucial part of the culture and is an essential part of becoming a Pentecostal. Nevertheless, a growing number of Pentecostals share very different experience of conversion. Easy decision that could be described as a decision to follow the same path she or he has already done, to follow one's own culture and upbringing. Nevertheless, the explicit conversion constructs Pentecostal identity, albeit very different ones for converts outside and inside the movement. Social class is a contested concept and I won't go into detail in this presentation, but for this article a major importance is the difference between class culture in lower and middle class positions. The different positions in societal hierarchy, life experiences and resources result in different ways of dealing with one's position, as well as attitudes towards life circumstances. In the middle class, a desire to sustain and achieve balance is often seen, and therefore the culture can be described as moderate. In lower classes, the lack of resources might lead to more radical attitude, since the position and circumstances should be improved. In my research amongst Finnish Pentecostalism, I found that Pentecostal culture promotes certain social positions, of which many were middle-class positions. Moreover, the culture shared many of the values that middle-class culture entails, for example of sustaining societal balance, moderation and decent public conduct. Noteworthy was the division between socialized and converted members of Pentecostal church. It was clear that the socialized members were more influenced by the congregational culture and therefore were found in those positions that the culture promoted. The congregational culture is shaped with multiple factors: Finnish culture, religious history predating Pentecostalism, constructing a distinct group identity within certain historical settings, converts and their descendants' positions and styles, shared and constructed view of religion, its boundaries, and so on. Finnish mentality and culture promotes moderate and humble presence and presentation of self. This is also seen in the Pentecostal movement, especially if you compare it to Pentecostalism around the world. Personal and public conduct is relatively moderate and controlled. In Finnish setting, Pentecostalism prefer promoting radicalism that would focus on toward inner religious life, emotional and mental sphere, and not necessary public demonstration of religion. When Pentecostalism in Finland was a young religious phenomenon, there was a need for radical identity that competed with the state church and its legitimacy as criteria for Christianity. In the decades after that, this need has faded due to personal experiences and diminished role of the church in the society, and after many members are now found in middle-class positions, the moderate aspect of culture has only got strongly in the movement. Furthermore, there has always been an aspect of control in Finnish Pentecostalism, whether it concerned dress or behavior codes, or not letting emotions to overshadow teaching. In my research, I found that congregational culture in Turku Pentecostal Church promotes certain positions and lifestyles, and of importance are ideals of helping, occupations of doctors and nurses, educating, occupations of teachers, and making civilized and being a good witness to outsiders that leads to controlling one's behavior and following general social norms and of appropriate behavior and avoiding societal radicalism. An occupation that would be helpful, at least potentially helpful, for spreading one's religion and its values is easier to legitimate and explain as a vocation, calling and good choice. In the light of Finnish moderate culture and Pentecostals' Christian moral teachings about decent conduct, the working class, uneducated, unorganized and sometimes radical image was seen as an opposite culture from which one should develop into more Christian-like conduct and lifestyle through the supposed help of God. This pattern of thought demonstrates the ideal of civilizing, not so much a direct opposition of lower-class social positions, since they could be included in the repertoire through the idea of suffering, which is also a favorite discourse in Pentecostalism, but an ideal of developing into better person as Christians. Together with middle-class idealism, church culture promotes these styles and positions, not societal radicalism and societal changes. Even though there has been an increasing interest for social work and aiding the poor outside the church, the major objective for a Pentecostal is still direct into the coming world, expedite the coming of Christ and preparing oneself for the future. When I compare different groups in Turku Pentecostal Church, I noticed that there is an important difference between socialized and converted social positions. And this difference wasn't due to their parents' positions, since the origins were relatively same in the sense. It became clear that the explanation was for major part the culture of Pentecostal congregation, and moreover the occupations of socialized members suited well with the values and discourses of the congregation. In my interviews, it became clear that the converted members did take into account the socially acceptable values, occupations and positions, but their decision-making process was more difficult and their roads leading to decisions longer. For example, one woman described how she left her job as a waitress. She tried and applied for a couple new educations and careers before she found her socially acceptable career in security sector. Of course, for some, the decision for a career was already made. For them, the key question was how to legitimate their position. If they didn't want to change their occupation, they had to somehow make it legitimate. These two groups weren't only separated by the experienced social acquired mobility, but of great importance was also the difference in conversion experiences and processes. There was a noticeable separation between radical and moderate conversion, which furthermore shaped their religiosity. I had made the same note in the research for my master's thesis earlier. Back then, I interviewed a group of young Pentecostal students of how they presented their religion, narrated their faith. The one interviewee who was converted from totally non-Pentecostal background, he narrated his belief with the strongest Pentecostal vocabulary and phrases that used traditional symbols. Those who had more Pentecostals in their families narrated their religion more creatively, combining different symbols and using more rich language. Part of the difference was due to educational background, but not in every case. For socialized member of Pentecostal church, their religion is cultural continuity. Therefore, their Pentecostal identity is not so much about the choice, although it is there, but the worldview and its stability. They continue with the path and symbol world they have always known. From this follows that they tend to focus their efforts on preserving the status quo already achieved, improving public image and sensibility of their religion, and placing emphasis on normality. Another point that I have made is that since the socialized member lack a dramatic conversion and its input for Pentecostal identity, they tend to rationalize and make their religion sensible at the cognitive level, quite distinctive. Considering all the above, the style of constructing identity and presenting a religion is very much similar with the middle class values when it comes to preserving one's social position. For the converted members, Pentecostalism and religion is their choice, usually a radical choice if Pentecostalism is a minority culture. Therefore, it follows that they are keen to differentiate themselves from past cultures and lifestyles and emphasize the uniqueness of their worldview. Their conversion is a process where radical identity isn't constructed only by a decision moment, but also of the whole identity-making process, where this new identity is seen and constructed as opposite, sacred against the previous profane lifestyle and culture. As opposite to socialized experience, the conversion experience for outsiders resembles more of the working class culture. Different conversions, processes and personal histories place these two groups in one another dividing situation also. The process and emotion of inclusion into the group culture. For a socialized member, and the culture is already familiar. When the congregational culture is developing more and more moderate, the moderate conversion preserves this objective. The situation in a radical conversion is very much different. For a lower class convert, it takes also more time to adjust to moderate culture than for a middle class convert. Even when the convert is from middle class, his or her conversion experience doesn't help in this process in every way. She or he might adjust to the culture better and faster, but there is still a sense of mismatch in the beginning because of the radicalism of the polarization. With internalized culture knowledge, there comes another advantage for the socialized member. In order to promote cultural change, it has to be legitimized by inside symbols and rituals, and therefore if one is to change his or her culture, one has to be familiar with it. And new positions have to be legitimized according to cultural standards. And in Pentecostal setting, this happens predominantly by biblical phrases, but also with an aspect of evangelization. Mainly, if one can practice his or her faith or spread one's religion, the position can be accepted even when questionable. Now let me get back to the division between radical and moderate experiences and cultures. The moderation in the movement is partly due to the conversion experiences of socialized members who want to share radical dichotomies, tensions between previous life and new life, and between institutionalized religion and living faith that the outside converts often have. For the outside converts, the decision and the identity that is affected by it is a focal moment of gaining power over one's life circumstances. The new identity is his or her decision, and therefore it has to be defended. By sustaining a certain tension between previous and current lifestyles and worldview, a converted Pentecostal member relieves the decision moment and the focal point of identity, making it emotionally closer and stronger. The convert faces this dichotomous pattern many times in the process of constructing one's personal and group identity, as well as legitimizing his or her place in the religious group. Usually the convert tries to emphasize the traditional and sometimes stereotypical symbols and phrases in order to prove one's right for a place in the group. This process is crucial, especially in the beginning of one's Pentecostal life and the learning curve of how to become a Pentecostal. Later, especially the more educated members can shape their identity more creatively. Because of the radical conversion, a convert might also change his or her occupation to more culturally and morally fitting to prove him or herself and others that the conversion is true. For the socialized member, there is no need to prove one's belonging to the church, since one is already a part of it and knows its symbol word and inside and outside. Therefore, it is easier for him or her to choose an occupation and social position one finds fitting for. Knowing the cultural world also helps an individual to balance his or her religious identity with personal desires. Did I pass this one or was it there? Wait. Anyway, now to the conclusions. In this article I have described and analyzed the different experiences between socialized and outside converted Pentecostal members and the consequences of their process of inclusion to the group. The nature of their conversion decision and identity making through this process and the actions they expect and what is expected from them frame their further decision environment and guide their paths very different ways. This demonstrates that the conversion experience and the need to prove one's faith can be important in the process of how an individual ends up to one's social position. The culture of an individual and one's primary cultural group sets boundaries in which to choose and legitimize one's decisions, positions and status. People do differ in the sense of their possibilities and resources to move within those boundaries based on their conversion experience, cultural knowledge and immersion into it. There are other factors to be noted as well, like previous history, existing resources and modes of capital, but these can't explain away the effect of conversion and group inclusion completely. Conversion experiences are shaped by different histories and tradition backgrounds as well as social positions. Furthermore, they also shape the identity of a believer and therefore shape the mental boundaries within an individual feels comfortable to move. This is also seen in the difference between social positions and class cultures that individuals are willing to identify themselves with. Even though both could end up in same occupations and positions, the process seems easier for the socialized since they have internalized the culture and don't have to prove that they belong to the group. Therefore, it is important to notice and study further the difference between socialized and converted members and their experiences. A closer look to their situations can also reveal how religious groups, their social structure and styles are changed. Thank you.